John, who's on your Mount Rushmore?
Oh man, if you can say Mount Rushmore for MMA, I look at it a little different than some people because I think you gotta be smart about who you put in there. There's no way that you can have a Mount Rushmore for MMA and not have the guy that was the first one that brought everyone's attention to it. The guy that was taking on bigger fighters, the guy that was choking people out when it was not popular to be using grappling. Hoist Gracie's got to be on that Mount Rushmore. No doubt in my mind. He deserves it. He should be there, and I would put him in that position. The next guy I'd put, wow, George St. Pierre has got to be on it too. And when you look at a guy that has had a career the way he has, winning multiple titles in different weight classes, his reign once he established, he won the title, he lost the title, he got that title back, and then the reign that he established throughout it, and the way he changed the fight game, he brought it into the next level. I got to put George St. Pierre on the list. Fedor Emelianenko is another one. What he did in Pride, the win streak that he had for that long, and how he did it, he's going to be on my Mount Rushmore. And you know, it's so hard to say the other guys, but everyone's in there. I kind of want to put, the guy who created the whole thing, Art Davie. He deserves it. If it wasn't for him coming up and making it happen, it never would have happened. So he might be on my Mount Rushmore too. Two guys from UFC one. But if I was going to say another fighter, it would probably be Anderson Silva would be on the list right there. Randy Couture would be someone that I would have a lot of want for that. And now Daniel Cormier is another guy that I'm looking at. If he can win this fight against Stipe, and if he ends up taking on John Jones, definitely if he wins it, you got to look at Daniel Cormier. Look at the championships he won, the Grand Prix with Strikeforce, the light heavyweight title, the heavyweight title. Daniel Cormier has brought himself into that position.
All right, so I feel you on a couple of them. Obviously, I have a hard line with people that have been busted for cheating. So for me, Anderson Silva is off the list.
Yeah, well, that's why
Yeah.
I say I'd like to, but what has happened in the last part of his career
Yeah.
is what does take him off of the list.
Yeah.
You're right. I agree with you.
So for me, where do you? So for me, I agree with you. I agree with you on Hoist. I agree with you on GSP. I'm not too familiar as much like with Art Davie, and I understand the history behind it all and stuff, but I don't know if that's kind of what I was looking for. But I mean, for you, I understand why. Your reasoning behind it. I'm thinking more in terms of fighters.
Fighters, I know.
Yeah. So for me, I would say Hoist, GSP. How do you fit Frank Shamrock in that mix?
And the problem for Frank is this. I mean, Frank had a run that was phenomenal, and you look at what he did, and he was the at the time it was the middleweight champion of the UFC, and undefeated, takes his belt, puts it down on the ground, and walks away. And you look and you go, hey, he had some incredible fights. He had an incredible fight, outside of the UFC when he first fought John Lober, and he fought him in Hawaii. And you go back and you watch that fight and everything that happened, and then you watch the progression of how he changed as a fighter and what he did for the sport in a lot of ways. He brought Strikeforce up on his back because he was the main fighter for Strikeforce at the time, that he was the name, and he kind of helped Scott Coker establish that. It's just that Frank, in a lot of ways, had fights that he never fought that top guy.
Yeah.
He fought the top guy at the time back at UFC 22 when it was Tito Ortiz. But then as he got longer in his career, he was fighting guys like Phil Baroni, who had fought in the UFC, beaten some guys, but never was fighting the top guys at the time. And that's the difference. That's why the George St. Pierre, he fought every top guy because he was the top guy. Every number one contender was taking him on. And so I look at that. When Fedor was fighting in Pride, he was fighting all those guys that were, the Nogueiras and the Crow Cops. He was taking on all those top guys. That's what I'm looking for. Daniel Cormier taking on all those top guys.
Okay.
You look at the guys that he's faced, that's what you have to have. And in my opinion, for the Mount Rushmore, now I'm not talking Hall of Fame, because Frank Shamrock absolutely deserves to be in the UFC's Hall of Fame, he deserves that, no doubt, hands down, 100%. The difference for me for that Mount Rushmore is just the quality of opponents throughout the career.
Okay, so now that you just touched on that, I'll just give you another name, though. I can agree with you on the Frank Shamrock thing, but I'll give you another name, BJ Penn.
Well, look at it. When we're talking about
you said the quality of opponents. The quality of opponents. He was doing things before everybody else was doing it.
Take a look at the record.
Yeah.
When you're taking a look at the record, that's what tends to take BJ out of the equation. At one time, I would have told you BJ was the most talented fighter that I had seen as far as having the whole package. He was that guy, and he took on anybody. Think about, man, he was going against Lyoto Machida at light heavyweight. I mean, it was crazy the stuff that BJ did.
Yeah.
And you can look and say BJ is absolutely one of the best fighters in this sport has ever seen at a certain point in his career. You could take John Jones. Take a look at the list of fighters that John Jones has beaten. And there's no doubt that John Jones is absolutely one of the greatest fighters, if not the greatest fighter there's ever been. But do I think he belongs on that Mount Rushmore? I think that Mount Rushmore, in my opinion, is not just what you do in the cage. It's sometimes what you do outside of the cage. Okay. That's why Daniel Cormier and what he does with kids and the taking of time to do wrestling and all the things that he's doing for other people, that's part of what puts you on that list.
Yeah, so for me, I keep BJ on there because, like, Muhammad Ali had a lot of crappy fights at the end of his career, okay? And we still look at him as being potentially one of the best. People talk about him being the best of all time, whatever it was, but the hype and all the things that came around with him and all the things that he did to help bring boxing to that next level. For me, BJ did all those things. He left when he was the champion. He started another organization with his family, was the champion there, but then also brought in guys that the UFC couldn't sign. Takanori Gomi fought the best, who everyone considered the best lightweight in the world at the time was Gomi. They thought, people were saying. BJ walked right through him. I was there at that show. They put their own money on the line. He helped change the sport and bring it to what the level is now. He made the UFC rewrite their contracts based on the fact that he left while he was the champion. Then he came back, and sure, he had some losses to GSP and to some other guys. But the thing is he was never the biggest guy. And you just brought up the Lyoto Machida thing. I think always put him on there because he beat Matt Hughes when people thought Matt Hughes was unstoppable. And then after he beat Matt Hughes, he left and went and beat Renzo Gracie, Rodrigo Gracie, and Takanori Gomi outside of and did his own promotion, built him up to be a superstar there. And then he fought Lyoto Machida, who was 220 pounds in K1. And honestly, it was a great fight. I mean, I thought it was a great fight. He had some, now obviously towards the end of his career, we're looking at all the losses he's strung up. But he never is someone that shied away from a fight. I think as a fighter, he's a true fighter deep down inside. He still is, and we've seen some of the troubles he's had, recently fighting outside. But it's who he is. He's a fighter. And I think for me, I have to put him on there. I don't want to go so much based off of, like you were talking about, what you do outside the cage as well, but all the things that you've helped do to get the sport where it is now. I mean, there's 4 gyms in Hawaii that have his name on it, UFC gyms that say BJ Penn on it. I mean, he's that fighter that's done all the other things to elevate not just the UFC, but the sport itself. And so I put him on there. I see your argument with the Frank Shamrock deal. For me, a Fedor would go on there as well, because obviously in the heyday of Pride, and he didn't seem like someone who was on steroids, and we know a lot of the guys that he was fighting, they were. And when I fought over there, they had talked about, the contract said we do not test for steroids, so you knew that they weren't testing for steroids. And that to me, I think for him to do the things that he did against all those top level guys, Mirko at the time was knocking everybody out with head kicks, and Nogueira and Big Nog, those guys were just walking through guys, subbing everybody, beating everybody up. But I think for sure Fedor. So I mean, realistically, I've got, like you said, Royce, GSP, BJ Penn, Fedor. I'm missing probably one, but I think I'm going to leave that slot open for right now, because the only reason why I say that right now is because people talk about John Jones, people talk about Anderson. I'm gonna be very upfront and real, and that leads me into my next question. Is for me right now, I'm gonna leave that spot for Khabib.